At 74 years old, Eleanor Whitmore never imagined a stranger could legally take her house away. But on a freezing Tuesday morning in October, she opened a letter demanding $9,700 in HOA violations, or the home she had shared with her late husband for 31 years could be seized. At first, Eleanor thought it had to be a mistake. Then she noticed the bright red stamp across the envelope. Final notice. Her hands began to shake. Outside, Willow Creek Lane looked peaceful as ever. Freshly cut lawns, white fences, quiet streets lined with maple trees glowing orange in the autumn sun. But inside that envelope was a threat powerful enough to destroy everything she had left. And the worst part, at the bottom of the page someone had written a sentence by hand. "You should have left when you had the chance." Eleanor read it twice. Then a black SUV slowly rolled past her house. The driver stared directly at her, and suddenly she realized this was no longer about neighborhood rules. Someone wanted her gone. 31 years earlier, Willow Creek Lane had felt like paradise. Back then, Eleanor and her husband Harold were young, hopeful. Harold worked long hours as a mechanic, while Eleanor taught second grade at the local elementary school. They saved for years to buy that little blue house with the wooden porch and oak tree in the yard. Harold built the porch swing himself. Every scratch on the floorboards carried memories. Christmas mornings, birthday parties, late-night conversations, and after Harold passed away from cancer 5 years earlier, that house became the only place where Eleanor still felt close to him. Every morning she followed the same routine: tea at 7, water the roses at 7:30, feed the birds before 8, then sit quietly on the porch swing Harold built with his own hands. Simple, peaceful, safe. At least it used to be. Everything changed when Richard Corman became HOA president. The neighborhood noticed immediately. Within weeks, new rules appeared everywhere. Trash cans couldn't stay outside longer than 30 minutes. Holiday decorations required approval forms, garden ornaments became community violations, and Richard enforced every rule like a man obsessed with control, especially toward elderly residents. He drove through the neighborhood in a black Mercedes SUV with HOA decals on the side, like he was patrolling a prison. People whispered about him constantly, but nobody challenged him, because Richard had a reputation. If he targeted you, he didn't stop. The first violation notice Eleanor received seemed ridiculous. Her mailbox blue was apparently outside approved neighborhood color guidelines. Harold had painted that mailbox himself 20 years earlier. Still, Eleanor apologized and repainted it. Then another letter arrived. Her hedges were uneven. Then another. Her porch light looked outdated. Then another. The ceramic angel near Harold's memorial roses violated decorative standards. Each letter came with fees: $20, $50, $100. The amount slowly increased like someone tightening a rope around her neck. At first, Eleanor tried staying calm, but then she started noticing something strange. The rules only applied to certain people. Mr. Grayson down the street had a rusted fence for nearly 2 years. No fines. A wealthy couple parked a giant RV beside their driveway every weekend. No letters. Richard's own brother kept broken patio furniture visible from the street. Nothing happened. But Eleanor, she received notices almost weekly, and every time she saw Richard driving slowly past her house, she felt watched. One afternoon, Eleanor spotted a man taking pictures of her yard from the sidewalk. "What are you doing?" she asked nervously. The man lowered his camera. HOA inspection. Then he pointed toward her rose garden. Those flowers exceed approved landscaping boundaries. Eleanor stared at him in disbelief. "They're roses." "Ma'am, I'm just doing my job." Walked away while continuing to photograph her property like it was a crime scene. That night, Eleanor barely slept. And 3 days later, the real nightmare began. It happened during the monthly HOA meeting. Eleanor almost didn't go, but after receiving her 7th violation notice in 1 month, she finally decided she needed answers. The clubhouse was crowded. Richard sat at the front wearing an expensive grey suit and polished silver watch that gleamed under the lights. He smiled constantly, but it never reached his eyes. When Eleanor's turn came to speak, she stood slowly. The room became quiet. "I'm trying to understand why I keep receiving these notices," she said politely. Richard folded his hands calmly. "Because your property continues violating community standards. I fixed most of the issues. Not all." A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Eleanor swallowed hard. "I don't understand why my roses are suddenly a problem after 30 years. Richard leaned back in his chair. Neighbourhood standards evolve. Then he smiled. "And frankly, Mrs. Whitmore, some residents struggle to maintain the image this community deserves." The sentence hit the room like ice water. Eleanor's face flushed red. "Are you saying I don't belong here anymore?" Richard shrugged. "If someone can't afford to maintain community expectations..." He paused deliberately. "Perhaps they should consider downsizing." The room fell silent. Nobody spoke. Nobody defended her. Several neighbours avoided eye contact entirely. And for the first time since Harold died, Eleanor felt completely alone. The final letter arrived 8 days later. Certified mail, bright red stamp, final notice. Eleanor opened it slowly at her kitchen table, while rain tapped against the windows. At first she couldn't even process the words, then her breathing stopped. According to the HOA, Eleanor owed $9,700 in unpaid fines, late fees, landscaping violations, administrative penalties, and legal processing costs. Failure to comply within 30 days would result in foreclosure proceedings against her property. 30 days. That was all she had left. Eleanor read the page again and again. Then her eyes landed on the handwritten sentence at the bottom. "You should have left when you had the chance." Her coffee mug slipped from her fingers and shattered across the kitchen floor. She didn't even move. For nearly an hour, Eleanor sat frozen in silence while rain darkened the windows around her. Finally, she opened the old wooden box beside the fireplace. Inside were photographs of Harold. One picture showed him proudly standing beside the porch swing he built, smiling, happy, alive. Eleanor touched the picture gently. "They're trying to take our home," she whispered, and suddenly she broke down crying, not quiet tears. Real grief, the kind that empties a person completely. The next morning, Eleanor found another surprise. A bright orange violation sticker had been placed directly on her front door for the entire neighbourhood to see. Non-compliant property. She stared at it in horror. A teenager riding past on a bicycle slowed down to look. Then another neighbour walked by, pretending not to notice. Humiliation burned through her chest. By afternoon, Eleanor noticed curtains moving in nearby houses. People were watching, but nobody came over. Nobody asked if she was okay. And late that evening, a black Mercedes SUV stopped across the street. Richard sat inside, watching her house, smiling. Then he drove away. 3 days later, Eleanor received a phone call from her bank. "Mrs. Whitmore," the woman said carefully, "we received notice regarding possible legal action connected to your property." Eleanor nearly dropped the phone. Legal action. The words echoed in her mind long after the call ended. That night, she sat alone at the dinner table staring at Harold's empty chair. The silence inside the house felt unbearable. Then someone knocked on the door. Eleanor hesitated before opening it. A young man stood outside holding a grocery bag. It was Noah Martinez, 28 years old. Former army mechanic. Recently moved into the neighbourhood. Eleanor recognised him immediately. He was the quiet man who always helped elderly residents carry groceries. "I heard about the HOA," Noah said carefully. Eleanor forced a weak smile. "It's embarrassing." "No," Noah replied. "It's wrong." Something about the way he said it made Eleanor pause. Then Noah glanced toward the street before lowering his voice. "You're not the first person Richard's targeted." Eleanor frowned. "What do you mean?" Noah slowly pulled several folded papers from his jacket. Violation notices, court threats, foreclosure warnings, different names, same HOA signature. He's been doing this for over a year, Noah said quietly, mostly elderly homeowners. Eleanor stared at the documents in disbelief. Why? Noah hesitated. Then he said something that changed everything. Because developers want this neighbourhood. Over the next few days, Noah revealed something disturbing. A real estate company had quietly approached several elderly residents offering cash to buy their homes. Most refused, especially people like Eleanor who had lived there for decades. Then Richard became HOA president, and suddenly, those same residents started receiving endless violations, pressure, threats, fines. Some eventually moved away just to escape the harassment. Others paid thousands. One elderly widower suffered a heart attack during a legal dispute with the HOA. Eleanor felt sick listening to it all. You think Richard's helping developers force people out? Noah nodded. I think he's profiting from it. The deeper they investigated, the worse things became. Duplicate fines, missing financial records, fake landscaping invoices, unauthorised consulting expenses, and every trail somehow led back to Richard Corman. Meanwhile, the pressure against Eleanor kept escalating. One morning, she woke up to discover someone had destroyed Harold's rose garden overnight. Flowers ripped from the soil, broken stems scattered across the yard. Eleanor fell to her knees in shock. Those roses were planted the week Harold died. And now they were gone. Noah arrived minutes later after seeing the damage. This wasn't random, he said quietly. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. I think they want to break me. Then Noah noticed something near the sidewalk. A security camera mounted on a nearby house had captured part of the street, and suddenly, they had a lead. The footage changed everything. At 2:13 a.m., a man wearing a hoodie entered Eleanor's yard, but when the camera angle shifted briefly under a streetlight, his face became visible. It was one of Richard's HOA inspectors. The same man who photographed Eleanor's roses weeks earlier. Noah immediately copied the footage, and 2 nights later, Eleanor attended another HOA meeting. This time, the atmosphere felt tense before it even began. People whispered constantly. Some residents had already heard rumours about Richard. When public comments opened, Eleanor slowly stood. Richard rolled his eyes immediately. Mrs. Whitmore, if this is another emotional outburst— No, Eleanor interrupted calmly. This is evidence. The room went silent. Noah connected a laptop to the projector. Then the footage played. The inspector entering Eleanor's yard, destroying flowers, ripping plants from the soil. Gasps spread across the room. Richard's face instantly changed colour. This proves nothing, he snapped. Then Noah stood up. We also found missing HOA funds. More documents appeared on screen. Unauthorised payments, suspicious transfers, consulting fees connected directly to Richard. The room erupted. People started shouting questions. An elderly man near the back suddenly stood up. You threatened my wife last year. Another woman pointed toward Richard. You fined us over a wheelchair ramp. Then another voice shouted. You targeted my father too. The room exploded into chaos. Richard slammed his fist against the table. Sit down. But nobody listened anymore. Because fear had finally turned into anger. The next morning, Willow Creek Lane looked completely different. News vans lined the street, reporters interviewed residents outside the clubhouse. And online, the story spread like wildfire. HOA president accused of targeting elderly homeowners. People across the country flooded the comments. Some shared similar HOA horror stories, others demanded investigations, but Richard still refused to back down. That afternoon, Eleanor received another letter, this time from Richard's attorney. It accused her of defamation and threatened legal action if she continued false accusations. Eleanor's hands shook reading it. For a moment, the fear returned. Then Noah noticed something inside the envelope. There was no official law firm address, no verified contact information. Fake. Richard was bluffing, trying to scare her into silence one last time, and that was the moment Eleanor stopped being afraid of him. 3 days later, county investigators arrived publicly at the HOA office. Residents gathered outside, watching officers carry boxes of financial records into waiting vehicles. Richard tried leaving through the back entrance, but neighbours spotted him immediately. People shouted as he hurried toward his Mercedes. "You bullied old people! You should be ashamed! You almost took her house!" Richard ignored everyone, until Eleanor stepped forward. He froze the moment he saw her. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Richard forced a bitter smile. "You really think this changes anything?" Eleanor looked him directly in the eyes. "No," she said quietly. "I think it changes everything." The final HOA meeting happened 1 week later, and this time, the clubhouse overflowed with residents. People stood against walls, others waited outside listening through open windows. The atmosphere felt electric. Temporary county officials reviewed the investigation publicly. Financial fraud, selective enforcement, property intimidation, harassment, targeting elderly homeowners. Every revelation triggered louder reactions from the crowd. Then Richard himself entered unexpectedly. The room instantly erupted. People booed loudly. One woman yelled, "You terrorized this neighborhood!" Richard tried speaking over them. "You're all overreacting!" That only made things worse. Then Eleanor slowly walked to the front. And suddenly, the entire room became silent. She looked around carefully before speaking. "For months," she began softly, "I thought I was alone." Several residents lowered their heads. "I thought maybe I really had become a burden." Her voice cracked slightly. "I started feeling afraid inside my own home." The room remained completely still. Eleanor held up the foreclosure notice. "This piece of paper nearly destroyed me." She paused. But the worst part wasn't losing money. Tears filled her eyes. It was believing nobody would stand beside me. Several people in the audience began crying quietly. Then Eleanor turned toward Richard. "You wanted elderly people scared enough to disappear." Richard looked away immediately. "But this neighborhood doesn't belong to people who abuse power." Eleanor's voice grew stronger. "It belongs to the families who built their lives here." Applause erupted, then grew louder and louder, until the entire room stood cheering. Even some former HOA board members joined in. Richard sat frozen, while the community he once controlled turned completely against him. Moments later, county officials announced all foreclosure actions, and violations connected to Eleanor's case were permanently dismissed. The room exploded again. Some neighbours hugged Eleanor, others apologised for staying silent, and for the first time in months, she finally felt safe. Richard Corman resigned that same night. Weeks later, investigators confirmed he had secretly worked, with developers trying to pressure elderly homeowners into selling properties below market value. Multiple lawsuits followed. Several families returned to the neighbourhood after learning the truth, but the biggest change happened quietly. Neighbours began acting like neighbours again. People checked on elderly residents. Community dinners returned. Children played outside without fear or tension hanging over the streets, and Eleanor. She slowly rebuilt Harold's rose garden, one flower at a time. Late one evening, she sat on the porch swing Harold built decades earlier, while soft golden sunlight covered Willow Creek Lane. No sirens, no cameras, no black SUV watching her house, just peace. Across the street, Noah waved while helping another elderly neighbour carry groceries inside. Eleanor smiled softly. Then her eyes drifted toward the front door where that terrible letter once arrived. Funny, she thought. One envelope was supposed to destroy her life. Instead, it exposed the people who never deserved power in the first place. She leaned back gently on the porch swing as evening settled over the neighbourhood. Safe again. Home again. And no longer alone.